in the US where she is. Thank you very much, Dr. Ito, for joining. Let me also thank all of you who have logged into this meeting for finding time to join this tele-echo session. For us to have a fruitful discussion, would like to remind you of the following. Zoom etiquette. Please mute your mic as you join the meeting, and let's raise our hands as we try to speak so that we don't disturb others. And let's also remember to register our attendance for this meeting. On our panel of experts, we have Dr. Kozia Ziambo from the Ministry of Health, Dr. Gloria Muntali, and Dr. Chimika Piri, and also Dr. Muya Muya. I've also seen other experts, Dr. Mubiana Mwangelwambewe from ASIDAS that will help us have a fruitful discussion. We also have a case presentation to be presented by Sister Veronica Piri from Luvuto Clinic on the Copper Belt. So without wasting so much time, I would like to ask Dr. Ito to share the presentation and take us through the didactic presentation. Dr. Ito.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Manzi. I hope you can hear me okay. And let me share my slides. Please, if you could confirm that you can see, and then we'll get started. Good afternoon.
Yes, we can see the slides and we can hear you. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Well, once again, good afternoon and welcome. So today we're going to be talking about pediatric case finding. So here are the learning objectives. So number one, we want to understand where the remaining gaps are when it comes to children, in terms of where we need to find them and who in terms of age group. And then number two, we want to understand if our testing efforts are currently aligning with the gaps that we see. And I'm going to be talking about some of the priority testing modalities for finding children, with specific focus on retesting of negative pregnant breastfeeding women, final outcome of HIV-exposed infants at 24 months, as well as outpatient sick entry point testing and family index testing, or the Know Your Child's Status campaign. So this is where we stand in terms of our remaining pediatric ART gaps. So using our most current CLHIV estimates of about 59,000 for the coming year, and using the TX curve from last quarter, Q1, we can see that there are certain provinces that have attained over 80% coverage, such as Southern, Western, and Lusaka provinces. So, you know, give ourselves a huge round of applause for that. That is a huge achievement. However, the overall ART coverage stands at around 70%, and we have not really budged in the last, few quarters, even a few years from that level. We know that there are limitations with the CLHIV estimates, so take that into account as you look at these numbers. But here I also wanted to point out that the absolute number of gaps that are greatest in the following provinces. So if you look at Central, that has the biggest gap at almost 3,000 children missing, followed by Luapula, and the usual suspects, the Copper Belt, Lusaka, and Eastern also has a pretty large gap as well. So just keep this in mind as I go through the rest of the talk. So the first question is, which pediatric age group has the lowest ART coverage? The first answer is under 5, number 2 is 5 to 9, and number 3, 10 to 14 years.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meg. So I'll launch the poll. The question is, which pediatric age group has the lowest ART coverage? And we have 3 options to choose from. I'll launch the poll. Let us take part in the poll. We have 60 seconds to vote. Thank you so much so far for those that have managed to vote. Let's keep those votes coming. We are under 20 seconds before we close the poll. The participation is very good. Let's ensure that we all participate in this poll. Even if we are not sure, we'll learn as the discussion is going. Okay, 10 seconds, 5, and we end the poll, okay? So from the results, Dr. Meg, you can see majority of the people on the network feel the biggest gap. The lowest ART coverage is in the age less than 5 years, followed by those that are 10 to 14, and lastly, those between 5 to 9.
Great. Yeah, so the majority of you got the answer correct. So this is how it looks right now. So we're still missing about half of the under 5s. This is looking at actually 1 to 4. If I also include the under 1s, the gap is actually even greater. But there's some data issues around that. So just to keep it clean, I kept it at 1 to 4. And even with that, the coverage is at only 50%. As we get older, though, the coverage gets higher. So 83% for the young adolescents, the 10 to 14s. The 5 to 9, we have 77% coverage, given the denominator as the current CLHIV estimates that we have on hand. So basically, this tells us that we really need to focus our case finding on the youngest children, right? So I'm going to go directly to poll number 2, and this is a true or false. So despite advances in PMTCT efforts, estimates still show over 4,000 new child infections each year as a result of gaps in the PMTCT program. Number 1, yes. Number 2, false.
Thank you, Dr. Ito. So our second poll question is here. True or false, despite advances in PMTCT efforts, estimates still show over 4,000 new child infections each year as a result of gaps in PMTCT. Do we agree or disagree? I'll launch the poll. Okay, there you go. Let's decide. Do we still have gaps in PMTCT? Hence, we are having children still getting infected with HIV. What are your thoughts? Is it true or false? So far, about half of the network has voted. We are still encouraging those of us who haven't voted to please choose so that we know what you are thinking about the new HIV infections. Where are the gaps? Okay. So about 57% of the network has voted, and as you can see, 82% feel this is true, this statement is true, while 18% feel this statement is false. Dr. Meg?
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Manzi. So yes, once again, the majority of you guys got it right. Unfortunately, we're still seeing lots of new child infections. And so here in this slide, what you're seeing is the UNA's estimates. We call this the stacked bar graph, and many of you may have seen this already. But basically, this tells you the reasons why children are infected. So each of the colors represent potential gaps in the PMTCT program that lead to transmission. So you can see that although over the last 6 years, the number of new child infections has come down from about 8,000 down to over 4,000, so almost 50% decline. That's still too many children, right? And so many of these reasons are listed to the left, so I'm not going to go through them, but there are things like, women not starting on ART on time or not being on ART during pregnancy or breastfeeding. But what I wanted to point out here is that over a third, so the bars in the yellow at the top and then the orange in the middle, those indicate incident infections. What that means is these are women who test negative at ANC1, but become subsequently infected during either pregnancy or breastfeeding. And because they don't get retested, they don't know that they're positive. And so they don't receive the PMTCT interventions to prevent transmission. So this is really important because, we know that these women are very high risk for transmitting HIV to their babies. So this is why we're really emphasizing the need to retest negative pregnant breastfeeding women during the time that they're still breastfeeding. We know that, retesting these women who are negative is going to be low yield, right? That being said, we know that there are about over 500,000 women who come through ANC1 each year who are negative. And these are the women who need to be retested at strategic time points. And if we do that, we could be we could be detecting as many as 10,000 incident infections annually. And so, these women are at high risk for transmission because they're recently infected. And so they have as high as 10 to 15 mother to child transmission rate, because this is as if they're not getting any PMTCT intervention. And so if these women go undetected, we could be missing, over 1,000 new child infections. So this is a really important way for us to identify those young children, young babies who we're not detecting yet. It also offers a great opportunity to offer PrEP to pregnant breastfeeding women, which, as you all know, is a priority population for offering PrEP, and also an opportunity to increase male engagement. So the first thing I really wanted to emphasize is the importance of retesting. And so you can see here that our data from the last 6 quarters show that there are certain provinces that have really ramped up the retesting numbers. So you can see Lusaka as an example here in the middle. Since Q1 has reported, more than double the post ANC1 testing numbers. So this is just testing, not positives. But the important thing to point out here is that despite the scale up, this is only representing a fraction of the retesting that needs to be done. So, if we're saying that there are about 500,000 women, negative women at ANC1, and these women need to be retested at strategic time points. And what we're recommending is, of course, these women need to be tested around labor and delivery, as well as around 4 months, as well as 9 and 18 months to align with the EPI schedules, the immunization schedules of their babies. So if we do that, then we're talking about, almost 2 million tests plus. And so you can see here that we're nowhere close to getting it to 2 million tests. So we have a long ways to go in terms of doing retesting of the PBFW. The other key way that we're potentially missing children is through EID testing, right? We know who these exposed babies are, but we're not testing them until their final outcome, which is at 24 months or when they finish breastfeeding. So nationally, our 2-month EID coverage has been improving. So you can see on the table below that, in 2019, our 2-month EID was only at 67%. and that's been steadily increasing. But we're still below the 95% goal that we want to be aiming for. So we still have long ways to go. And then the final outcome testing is also improving with about 23% of children with unknown status at 24 months. So the remainder of those children have a status, so that's great. But we really want all children, all known exposed infants to have a status at 24 months to make sure that they're truly negative. So what we need to do is to leverage the MCH clinics to identify those young children who may have slipped through the cracks in EID test and cascade, and to make sure that all exposed infants are tested. So this is an important area that we need to keep in mind as we think about case finding of children. So the first takeaway point is that we need to really focus on maternal retesting and efforts to identify the under 5 children. And so need to really leverage the MCH clinics for identifying the children as well as retesting of the mothers. So moving on to other modalities for case finding. So here, what we're showing is how did we find the children over the last 6 quarters? So you can see that, the top bar is showing the testing volume in absolute numbers, but this is normalized to 100%. So you can see that most of the test came from index testing. And then the bottom bar is showing where the positives came from. So index testing, once again, contributed to over 50% of the positives identified, this is what we expect. And then other PITC, which is mostly OPD testing, is the second. And then the table below shows the testing yield. So for index testing was 1.4%, and then other PITC 0.7, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see here that there's certain entry points like TB that continues to have high yields as expected. So the next question is, are we testing where we need to be testing, right? Where are we testing where the gaps are the greatest? So the top bar is showing the CLHIV gaps. These are the gaps that I showed you in the first slide, where we have the gaps by province. And so the biggest gap here is in Central Province, followed by Luapula, Copperbelt, Lusaka, and Eastern. And this is, again, 100% stacked bar graph. Below that is the number of tests we did in the last 6 quarters. So ideally what we'd see is that the size of the bars, the proportions of the bars should align with the gaps, right? And so if you look at the case of Central Province, we actually did a pretty good job of that, right? I don't know, maybe like 17% of the gap is coming from Central Province, and about the same proportion of tests, the overall test came from Central Province. And what we would like to see is sort of a similar proportion of positives coming out of that effort of testing. Luapula, on the other hand, you can see that the gap is at the top, but then in terms of the testing volume and the proportion, we could be doing more relative to the gap. So one province that I do want to point out here, because it's interesting to me, is Lusaka, because you can see here that Lusaka in purple, we did about the same proportion of tests as its gap, right? However, the contribution of the positives coming out of Lusaka is much greater than the testing effort. So if you dive into what happened in Lusaka, there are a couple of lessons to be learned, I think. Number one, so here is, how the provinces tested children in the last six quarters. So Lusaka certainly was not the province that did the most number of tests, as you can see. It was Copperbelt. And in Copperbelt, the majority of tests came from the red, which is index testing. If you look at Lusaka's case, however, the majority of tests came from other PITC. So this is mostly out of OPD testing. So the first thing I notice here is, Lusaka did a lot of OPD testing. Now, Southern Province, on the other hand, did even more. But because its gap is so small, perhaps, maybe it's not it's not fine. It's becoming harder and harder to find positive children in Southern because the actual number of children to be found is so small. The other thing I noticed in Lusaka is the part in green, which is the pediatric modality. And this is the modality for the under 5 clinic. And so you can see here that Lusaka is really taking advantage of that entry point for testing, and that is proving to be important. And then TB clinic, which is in orange, you can see that, Lusaka continues to do, it's not a lot of volume, but it continues to test within this modality compared to other provinces. So, in OPD, what we're seeing here is that, Lusaka did 52,229 tests, 290 tests, and then found 589 positives. And the number needed to test to find one child was 89, which is not the lowest, but it's also not the highest. So it's pretty efficient at finding children in this modality. This, again, compared to Southern province, as I mentioned, it did more testing in this modality at almost 60,000, but the number needed to test to find one child was 193, so much less efficient to find for pediatric case finding in this province. And again, it's to be expected because the gap is so small. Other provinces like Copperbelt here did only 6,100 tests, but then the number needed to test was 55, so it was even more efficient in Copperbelt. And similarly in Luapula, the NNT was 28. So if you recall, these are the two provinces with a relatively large absolute gap of children. So, if these provinces were to increase their testing in OPD, it means that we could potentially find more children through this modality. So we need to really scale up PITC or OPD testing in these provinces, especially those with the largest gaps. Central, I think, is kind of an anomaly. It did do quite a bit of OPD testing, but the NNT was 293, which is the highest. But Central is also where we have one of the highest gaps. So this doesn't really align with some of what I said in terms of places with the biggest gaps should have low NNT. So we need to really look into what is going on in Central Province. So the next one is the pediatric modality. So once again, Lusaka reported the highest number of tests in this modality. Their NNT was 143, which is not the lowest, but it's one of the lower NNT. So it is more efficient compared to other provinces using this modality. And what's important here is that, they found 59 children through this entry point. It's not many, but we all know that every child counts. So, this is another entry point that we need to really leverage when it comes to testing. And once again, this is where it's an important opportunity to find those exposed infants who may have fallen through the cracks and don't have a final outcome. They could be 3-4-year-olds who never had a final outcome and needs to have that. Or this is an opportunity to test the mothers who are negative and potentially find those women who may have experienced an incident infection. And then lastly, this is testing in the TB clinic. So it is, Lusaka did the most number of tests in the TB through the TB modality and found 98 children. NNT was 16, so it is a very efficient modality. Copperbelt also found as many positive children, but they, only did 981. So, if a lot of these provinces that are that still have a large gap and have a high TB, HIV, if it makes sense epidemiologically, we really need to make sure that we're testing children for HIV in the TB clinic. So takeaway point number 2 is that we can't forget to test an OPD. and we need to ensure testing in the pediatric modality in the MCH and under 5 clinics, as well as in the sick entry points. And these are the TB clinic, the malnutrition, IPD. And I recognize that in many facilities, all of these like malnutrition clinic can fall under IPD. And so many of these different entry points may fall under one testing category. But we just need to make sure that we're not just doing index testing. We need to have a strategic mix of different entry points when it comes to effective case finding of children. So poll question number 3, true or false? Most implementing partners have achieved over 90% coverage of KYCS at this point. True or false? So most partners have achieved over 90% coverage of Know Your Child status at this point.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meg, for that presentation. And we have our third poll. Most of our partners have achieved over 90% coverage of Know Your Child HIV status at this point. What does the network think about this question? So I've launched the poll. Let's participate in the poll. Thank you so much to all those that have polled. We are doing very well as a network. Let's keep those results coming. We have 30 seconds to decide whether we have achieved over 90% Know Your Child HIV status coverage. Please, let's not type in the chat the responses. Let's follow the poll and give our feedback. I'll end the poll. And that's how we have polled, with 56% of the network saying it's true, while 44% feel this is false. Dr. Meg?
Great. So this is kind of a trick question, as you'll see in the next slide. Let's see, I'll move on. Okay, so this is the latest numbers that I've gotten from all the partners on KYCS performance. So I'm not going to go through these in detail, but basically this is sort of the cascade. And what I want to point your attention to here is in red, right? So in terms of elicitation coverage, we're at 94%. Testing coverage of all the children that need to be tested is 95%. And then the KYCS coverage on the whole is 95%. So that seems like we're doing awesome. And I don't want to discount that. I think we're doing, we have done a really great job in doing KYCS. But if you look at these numbers very closely, I think there are areas that we still need to work on. So the first number that I want to draw your attention to is the first column, which is the number of women living with HIV with children under 19 in households. So these are women who say, yes, I have either a biological child or a non-biological child that I care for in the same household. So that number in total was 507,000 women. However, these facilities reported a total of 646,614 women in all of these facilities. And in theory, these are all facilities that are supported by our implementing partners. But if you look at the MER, the TX-CUR numbers of 15 and above of women, that number totals 728,637. So at first glance, there is a gap in terms of the number of women being reported by the facility. So we are potentially missing as many as 82,000 women from eliciting the number of children that they have. So this number should be a little bit higher based on the TX curve. And then assume that these women have an average 1.2 children per woman, and this is using the data that we have found through our KYCS numbers that our partners reported, and this is 1.2 per any woman, not any, not the women who reported they have a child, but 1.2 per woman living with HIV. And that means that we're potentially undercounting 98,000 children. So the other gap that we have is that, the number of children we have elicited from the women is 800,000, but then we only have, test results from about 760,000 children. And so we still have about 38,000 not yet tested. And then I also wanted to draw your attention to this number 1.2 women, or 1.2 children per woman, which, knowing the demographics of Zambia, I think that this number is likely too low in terms of the average number of children, especially if we're taking into account non-biological children living in the same household as well. So basically, what this is showing us that we need to be looking at our numbers very closely. I know that, we feel that we have come a long way in doing KYCS, which is undeniable. And I think it's great that we're able to report these coverage numbers. But as we, continue on with KYCS, we need to make sure that, number one, we're including the non-biological children. And then number two, we're looking at our numbers very closely. So are we getting all the women at all the facilities, and how do those numbers compare to the TX curve that is being reported? So takeaway point number 3 is that we need to keep working on KYCS. KYCS plus, and especially in eliciting the non-biological children and ensuring elicitation of all women living with HIV. I want to take a moment here to explain why it's so important to include the non-biological children. So we all know that the gap of children living with HIV is much greater than the rest of the population, right? The overall first 95 is 89%. So we've reached, 89% of everyone living in HIV in Zambia know their status, which is great, but we're only at, 70% or slightly below that for children. And studies from other countries are increasingly showing the importance of offering HIV testing to the non-biological children living in the same household with PLHIV, in addition to the biological children. And this is because these non-biologic children may be an orphan or part of a hard-to-reach group, such as a child of a KPOP, or may have other risk factors that make them vulnerable to HIV infection. And so, so in some of these countries where they're showing the importance of including these children, the yield of testing these children, it could be as high as the biological children for given some of these risk factors. So, this is a potential missed opportunity if we don't include them. And that's why we are really emphasizing the importance of adding these non-biological children. Part of the problem, or part of the challenge of including these children is how do we report their testing in MER? And so for biological children, they need to be included as part of the HCS index. And non-biological children, on the other hand, though, they should be reported under other PITC if that testing is done at a facility, or other community if the child is testing at home or in the community. So just wanted to clarify that. So one other issue that I wanted to highlight is that, when we look at the index testing performance by province over the last 6 quarters, there's a huge variability in terms of efficiency of testing. So what I'm showing here is, Eastern, Lusaka, Northern, Southern, and Western, and the NNT in these provinces are what we would expect between 20 and 30, even a little bit higher, as in the case of Northern Province. But that's sort of the number that we would expect out of index testing if we're doing biological children. And then if you're doing, non-biological children, it might be higher, but they shouldn't really be reported under index. So in the other provinces like Central, Copperbelt, Luapula, Machinga, Northwestern, the NNT is much higher compared to the ones that are highlighted in pink. And so, I think we really need to understand what is happening in these provinces. Are we counting the non-biological children in these numbers? And if so, then we need to make that correction. I think that index testing is index testing, and there will be some variability depending on the epidemiological context of the province. If it is a province that still has a very large gap, then you would expect NN to be, lower compared to a province that has a very small gap and it's harder and harder to find children. But this type of variability should not be, it raises questions. So we need to be looking at our data more closely. So I just wanted to highlight that here. So how do we ensure completion of KYCS? So the goal in this fiscal year in COP22 is to really complete KYCS plus among the current TX-CUR cohort of women. So, as I mentioned, we're almost there. We're 90% plus coverage, obviously with some caveats, with some gaps that I noted, but we're still doing quite well. And so I think we're on track to complete KYCS amongst the current cohort of women on treatment. And then moving forward, once we complete that, we need to continue doing index testing, but focusing on the newly diagnosed women. And so in order to complete KYCS, we can't just rely on facility-based testing, as we know. We need to leverage testing in community settings to address barriers for families who may have trouble accessing facilities. So things like the community post model, as well as leveraging the OBC and community partners for the mobile testing in the community can really help us complete KYCS. We need to make sure that we are planning adequate HR resources to be able to allow for this type of testing. I know some partners have also done some dedicated day or weekends to offer HIV testing for the whole family, and that has proven to be successful. And then for the older children and adolescents, offering them HIV self-test kits is a way to reach those children who may otherwise not come into the facilities. Of course, male engagement is an important part of offering KYCS. And then lastly, I wanted to put a plug in to the fact that the KYCS register or binding them in SmartCare is an important part because we need to be able to track what the coverage is at this point. So last question is, each year we have identified as a country about 5,000 new children per year over the last few years. How many children do we need to find in order to be able to meet the goal of 95, 95, 95 for children by 2025? So number one is 5,000. So if we continue to do things business as usual, then we'll get there by 2025. Number two, 8,000. Number three, 10,000. And number four, 12,000 new children.
Thank you, Dr. Ito, for that presentation. For question 4, each year we have identified about 5,000 new children a year over the last few years. How many children do we need to be able to meet the goal of reaching the 95, 95, 95 for children by the year 2025? As you have seen, we have only made it to 70%. So if we are going to reach 95% for the first 95, how many children should we find each year? Let us participate in the poll. The poll has been launched. We have 40 seconds to give our feedback on that response, on that question, sorry. How many children do we need to test positive for HIV or to find with HIV every year if we are going to meet our 95, 95, 95 for children by the year 2025? Is it 5,000 or is it 8,000 or 10,000 or 12,000? So far, only 38% of the network has port. I'll give an allowance of a few seconds to allow a few more people to participate. Please let us participate in the poll. We want to know what you think about our HIV testing efforts. Should we just continue with the same? Are we going to meet our target if we just continue identifying 5,000 children, or we need to identify 8,000 or 10,000 or 12,000? I'll give just a few seconds. Okay, and I'll end the poll. So, Dr. Eto, that's how our network has put. Majority feel we need to identify at least 10,000 children per year, while others feel 8,000, while a few feel we need to identify 5,000, and another group feel we should identify 12,000. Your comment, Dr. Eto.
Great, thanks so much, Dr. Manzi. So yeah, the answer lies somewhere between B and C. So once again, it's kind of like a trick question. The number really depends on not just how many we're finding, but also how many are we losing, right? How it depends on our retention rate as well. So assuming sort of what we know to be true for the pediatric retention rate. We calculate about between 8,000 and 10,000 to be able to reach the 95 by 2025. The point I wanted to drive home is that, when it comes to pediatric case finding, I know that we need to test smarter. We know we need to focus where the gaps are. But at the end of the day, what we need to do is really just test more children. In order to find more children, we need to be testing more. And so what we are planning for in COP23, so for next year in FY24, the pediatric HCS target is much higher. So it's almost, twice as much, not quite, but almost twice as many as we achieved last year in COP21. So in COP21 FY22, we did, 170, almost 174,000 tests. We're targeting for 870,000 tests next year. So a lot more tests than we have been doing. And of course, our test kit procurements will be commensurate with this increase in the target. So, the lack of test kits will hopefully, I'm not going to guarantee that it's not going to be a problem, but hopefully because we're procuring more, we're planning to procure more tests to allow for this increase in testing, that's not going to be the limiting rate. And so, we need to test more, but we also need to be strategic about where we're testing and that we're ensuring that a strategic mix of modalities. So we're not just putting all of our testing eggs in one basket of either index testing or OPD testing. It has to be a right mix of the different modalities. So in terms of summary points, number one, let's focus on maternal retesting to identify those incident infections because those women are very high risk for transmitting their babies to their babies. And so if we catch these incident infections, we're potentially, number one, preventing the transmission from occurring. And number two, also identifying those babies who may otherwise go undetected for a while. And then we also need to make sure that we need to be testing the exposed infants into their final outcome. And so let's leverage the MCH clinics to be able to identify these women and these children. Number two, don't forget OPD testing and testing in sick entry points as well. Number three, let's keep working on KYCS, including the non-biological children. And let's aim to finish the current cohort of women by September 2023. And then just remember, we need to be testing more to find more the children that we're missing. But we need to be really smart about where the testing, where the gaps are. And let's focus our testing there and then make sure that we're not, that we're using a strategic mix of modalities to get to those children. So with that, I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ito, for that wonderful presentation. A number of issues have come out from the presentation, and I hope wherever we are logged in from, whichever part of the country and province, we've been able to identify our gaps from the presentation and where we really need to work hard for us to meet the 95% for HIV case finding for pediatrics. At this point, I'll invite questions from the network and any comments. So please, you can raise your hand and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask your question. I've seen the chat is active, and there was a comment which Dr. Muntali has responded to from Lillian about testing children below the age of 15 using the HIV self-test kits. So for adolescents less than 15 years, do we offer them HIV self-testing? HIV self-testing? And what about issues of consent? And Dr. Muntali has clarified that we need a guardian to give consent for younger children, including adolescents. And we have caregiver-assisted self-testing for children 2 to 16. Okay. Any other question? We still have a case that we have to discuss. So do we have any questions? Nathan, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manza, and thank you very much, Dr. Ito, for the wonderful presentation. Mine is the 870,000 upcoming target. Just wanted to appreciate, does that include all forms of testing? Let's say, does that include even the caregiver self-assisted testing in that number? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. Great point. So the 870,000 does not include self-tests because self-tests also have their own targets, and I don't know off the top of my head what that is, but that is also increasing. So no, that does not include self-tests, and it also does not include the retesting of the pregnant women either. This is really just HCS for under 15. So I hope that clarifies.
Thank you, Dr. Meg, for that feedback. I don't see any other question. There's a comment from Peter Singogo asking about to achieve these goals, we really need cooperation from the parents or guardians, especially the issue of consent. I think the issue of consent keeps coming up, whether we are dealing with adolescents or young children. We have young children who are brought to the facility, some of them even under the age of 5, by grandparents. How do you ensure that you provide an HIV test to such a child? Remember, there are issues to do with confidentiality when you are doing this HIV test. I think that is one issue where we seem to be having challenges. Should we just go ahead and test the child and keep the test results until we have access to give the results to the caregiver, the biological parents, or what happens? Because we seem to be missing out children coming to the facilities in such cases. Maybe we can get comments from the experts on the call. I've seen we have Dr. Chimika, Dr. Muntali, Dr. Muya, and Dr. Kozia.
Yes, Dr. Manzi.
Yes, Dr. Muya, the issue of consent. How do we move around the issue of consent, not only for adolescents, but also for younger children being brought to the facility by non-biological caregivers?
Yeah, so what I was going to say, that this, I think this has come up a number of times, especially the younger children. I know that some facilities in Osaka have brought this challenge up. I think what we did discuss and agree was that you can still make a follow-up. Just get all the details. If you're going to maintain confidentiality, get all the necessary details the way we do when we are getting like for index, so that you can follow them up and do the testing when you have access to their caregiver. Because they can give you where they stay, then you follow them up later and have a test done, or request the caregiver to come to the facility. That would be an easier way out. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Muya. Dr. Ziampo is with me in the hub and you would like to add?
Yeah, thank you very much. Like Dr. Muya said, this is a matter that has most of the time come up, and it has got several approaches to it. There is the legislative approach where you want to obtain consent, age of consent, but that process is still underway and we're still trying to get headway around there. But I think there are these other approaches which involves community engagement and involvement. And I feel personally that at this stage of the response in the HIV program, particularly for the pediatric, we really need to engage the community and use the community as much as possible, because through the community, then I feel we will be able to bring the story home. For example, if you're going to do KYCS, you want to make sure that it's at the lips of every person in the community. It becomes part of the community activity. And I think those are some of the approaches that we could begin to use, engagements, and as much as possible to stop thinking that the answers to some of these issues are with the healthcare workers and the healthcare providers. But I think so many answers lie in the community. And if we can really get into the community, find opportunities that will ensure that we are working with the community, we are sensitizing them, and so that they begin to see the need for the children to know their status, and also to just destigmatize some of these issues relating to HIV. That would be my response in the nutshell.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kozia, for that feedback. Indeed, we need to start thinking community for pediatric case finding. The same way we've done with the adults, we should do the same for pediatric. I've got two interesting questions in the chat. The first one is from John Kamona, asking about the data that you presented on KYCS Plus. Does it include data from the defense forces? And if not, how can we ensure that the data from the defense forces is included? The second question is from Dr. Chipasha Mungwe in province concerning the caregiver-assisted testing. There's a limit to the duration within which the test should be read. Are we to take verbal communication of the results? Kindly explain how it's supposed to be executed, especially in rural Zambia. It's not only in rural Zambia, but even in urban Zambia, because they'll take the test kit home, and if they are not able to interpret, they have to come to the facility. Should you redo the test when they come, or you rely on this? Because there's a time frame in which it should be read. Your comments, Dr. Meg, or the experts, before we move to our case.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there may be others on this call who may be better equipped to answer that question, but, we have lots of lessons learned from the ORCOOK study that was done in Zambia that basically showed high uptake and just the the ability for caregivers to be able to do the test successfully was quite high. So I'm not sure if there's anyone from the FASTER project who with experience with the data who can speak to that. But I do, yeah, there are lots of sort of education materials that we developed as a result of that study. And so I think that, it does require, educating the caregivers and how to do the tests, and certainly there are videos and materials to give to the caregivers in the local language, and overall that has been successful. But if there are concerns about that, then I do think this is an important opportunity to engage our community partners who can also help in tracking down those results. Over.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ito. Your feedback on the data for KYC, does it include the data from the Defense Forces?
So unfortunately, it does not. That was basically, reported by all the partners, and I did not include the data reported by JPIGO. So if I did include that, then it would change a little bit. But at the time, I did not have that data, so it does not.
All right, thank you so much. So I'm sure if we were to get that data, it will make a bit of a difference. So we'll move to our next part of the meeting, where we have a case being presented by Sister Veronica Piri from Lubuto. Sister Veronica, welcome. Are you going to share, or I share for you from this side?
Good afternoon. You can share for me from that side.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You can share. Jerry? Sister Veronica, are you able to see the presentation?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, you can go ahead and present.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Piri Veronica from Lubuto Clinic, Ndola. Today's case is on FM, who is 2 years, 7 months old, on ART for 1 year, 3 months. The child was born at a health facility, but DBS for the HIV testing was not collected at birth or at 6 days, but prophylaxis was given to the child. DBS was collected at 6 weeks, then it was positive. At the time of birth, the mother was virally and suppressed with a viral load of 8,070 copies. After the first DBS, which came out positive, a repeat DBS was done to confirm, and the child was initiated on ART. Past medical history, there was no history of any HEIs throughout treatment. There hasn't been any history of TB, though TPT was not given due to poor adherence issues that were identified. Under socio-economic, the mother is single. She's a domestic worker with 2 children. The whereabouts of the father is unknown. Mother with history of alcohol abuse, she usually gets her child wherever she goes. FM is the second born. Her elder sibling, aged 9 years old, is also on medication at our facility. The child is also being monitored by a community case worker under ACAP 1. We had 4 case conferences with the case worker who was assigned to do the dot plan for this child. Under physical examination on initiation, general condition of the child was stable and febrile. There was no pallor, no jaundice, no cyanosis. CNS, the child was very alert, playful, with none signs of meningism. RS, child not in respiratory distress, chest clear with no added sounds. CVS, S1, S2 was normal. PA, soft, non-tender on palpation. LA, no edema or lesions noted on the skin or extremities. Start weight was 6.9 kgs. Current weight is 11 kgs. Next slide. That is the profile for the viral load that we have done. These other investigations were not done due to some issues. At times, we used to have erratic supply of things to use in the lab. The first viral load was done on 10th of October 2021, and we received the results on 12 November 2021. The copies were 151,825 copies. The initial regimen for FM was ABC3TC LPVR. Then the child was switched to ABC3TC PDTG after the nation was guided that we switch all the pediatric on lopinavir to PDTG. The second viral load was done on 12th of August 2022. We received the results on 3rd of September 2022. The copies were 354,000. The regimen was, we still maintained ABC 3TC PDTG. We had extended EAC sessions after we consulted our senior personnel. We did another viral load on 16th of December 2022. We received the results on 4th of January 2023. The results were 43,100. The regimen was still maintained. On 5th of May, we collected another sample. We received the results on 22nd of May, and the results came back suppressed, which was 48 copies. After that, that is when we also gave the TPT, which was delayed on initiation. Our questions as a team: how can we ensure that we do not miss out on any testing in infants born to HIV-infected women? The second question: what other necessary intervention could have been employed in this case to reduce mother-to-child transmission, since the mother had a high viral load around the time of delivery? Thank you. I submit.
Thank you so much, Sister Veronica Piri, all the way from Lubuto on the Copper Belt, for the case presentation. Dear network, I now invite any clarifications or questions before we can respond to the 2 questions that our team at Lubuto have, so that together we can come up. We have so many children like baby FM who slip through the system. How do we ensure that we are doing the right thing? So any clarifications? Sim Kakeza, you've raised your hand. You can go ahead and give your comment. Or is it a question? Kakeza.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, the presenter. The child was, it's good that the child was actually eventually suppressed. But I've got a question. So I wanted to find out, maybe for the sake of learning, what barriers did you identify during the time that you were holding EAC sessions for the child? And what did you do in order to have the viral load suppressed? Because we've seen that eventually it was suppressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll get one more question, and then we have another question in the chat. Ruth, you can go ahead and ask your question.
My name is Ruth Kapia from Mwese Stage 2, RHC, Luapula Province. I want to answer the first question, which has been asked to say, how can we ensure that we do not miss out on testing infants born to HIV-infected women? What we are currently doing at our facility is, whoever has delivered that neonate, they have to collect NAT there and then and explain to the mother on how to give the drugs. So I think for us, it's working, and I'm sure it can still work to other facilities, I submit.
Thank you so much, Sister Ruth, for giving that feedback. Do we have any other question? The question in the chat asking how old the child is. So the child is 2 years, 7 months. LPCOE, can you go ahead and give your comments?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Would like to find out the antenatal history for this mother. It's something that didn't come out in the presentation.
Don't have a high distance. More options.
Hello. Hello. Are you able to get me? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. You can go ahead. There was some feedback.
Oh, okay. Yes. My name is Jill. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. Wanted to find out concerning the antenatal history for this mother. It didn't come out in the presentation. And also would like to know, like, the previous drugs that were given to this mother during the antenatal sessions, and whether they were doing the monitoring of viral loads every 3 months according to the guidelines. And then it was also mentioned that the DBS for this child was not done at birth, but at 6 weeks it was done. So wanted to find out, could it have been the reagents which were not available, or maybe they didn't have counselors to test? Yes, and yes, those are some of the concerns that would like to know from the team. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sister Veronica, maybe you can quickly respond to those. I know someone already attempted to tackle the first question, but quickly respond. What were the barriers identified during EAC? And could you give us more details on the antenatal history for this mother? And thirdly, what were the factors around failure to collect the DBS at birth?
Okay. So we identified 2 issues during the EAC session. One, the mother, since she has a history of alcohol abuse, she would miss out on some doses when she's away from home. Then the other challenge that she faced after giving the child, she said that the child would vomit upon being given the medication. So one of the interventions that we did is the DOT plan, involvement of the ICAP1, the caseworker who we assigned to go and be doing the DOT plan. And we also adjusted the doses of ABC3TC from OD to BD. Then there were some moments when the child would miss out the appointment because the mother couldn't manage to bring the child at the facility. When we asked the mother, she would say that I went away and I couldn't manage to come back. That was the same issue we had to the older sibling who is also on medication. We probed further, we asked the child. She disclosed to us that when mom is away and my medication finishes, she just calls on phone to instruct people who are home that you can give the child the medication for the mother to give to the child. You break the TOD into two parts, then she's given half of it. So after introducing the DOT plan, we found that we were moving into a good and correct direction. Then the reason as to why DBS was not done at birth and at 6 days postnatally, we had issues of the DBS kits. We didn't have DBS kits which would cater for the entire facility. Would have erratic supply of the kits. Upon receiving the kits, we would do a mop-up to call back all the children that were missed. No wonder this child was mopped up at 6 weeks. Then antenatally, unfortunately, this mother wasn't accessing the antenatal services at our facility. She accessed the antenatal services at a neighboring facility. But virologically, she was also, as noted in the presentation, she had the viral loads and she was unsuppressed for a quite number of months. We enrolled her into EAC, then she got suppressed after she delivered. Throughout her pregnancy, she was on EAC. The main challenge that we noticed from the mother was the alcohol issue that was hindering. I don't know if there's another question.
Mr. Veronica, I think you've handled all the questions very well. Thank you so much for clarifying on the barriers identified and also on the antenatal history. These are cases that we have. These are real case scenarios where we have a mother accessing antenatal at one facility, going to deliver at another. We don't even know how she was handled during antenatal or the viral load. There was a question in the chat about the CD4. Why don't we have, but I think you did highlight that there were issues with the lab with erratic supply of reagents. I have 3 hands. I'll allow, there are 4 now. I'll quickly allow Kwambo, then Cosmas, then Peter Singogo, and Wupe.
Good afternoon, Chair.
You can go ahead. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much. This is Twambo, the PMTCT nurse mentor for Chilenje Sub-District from Lusaka Province. I wanted to find out which peer pairing modalities they have in the province or that's working for the facility, because considering that this woman had a child who wasn't tested at birth, if this child was paired to a mentor mother or any peer strategy available, I'm sure this would have been rectified in the earliest possible time. And I also wanted to know if they are just relying on DBS, they are not doing any point of care testing at the facility. Thank you so much, I submit.
Thank you so much, Sister Veronica. I hope you've taken note. We'll take two more questions, one from Cosmas, the other one from Peter Singogo.
Okay. My name is Tembo Cosmas from Sefula. It's just a concern. I think maybe rather a contribution. I think we should also do a trio to such a child whom we know that the mother is an alcoholist. As soon as the mother maybe goes to drink, I assume she leaves the child with people. So maybe we can identify one who can be a treatment supporter from home. And then also as a facility, we should also develop the tendency of maybe writing the number of tablets in which the child is taking per day, so that the bird or the trio away from the mother can also know how many tablets is the child taking, to avoid the issue of underdosing and overdosing of the child. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Quickly, Mr. Singogo, you can go ahead. Mr. Singogo, you can go ahead with your question. Okay, since Mr. Singogo is not ready, can we have Madaliso Sakala?
Thank you very much, Chair. This is Madaliso Sakala, medical officer from Chilenje. My concern for me is, thank you very much actually for managing this client the way you did. We highly appreciate that. So I've got just a few questions. For me, my concern is going forward, knowing the environment that you're in, how are you going to ensure that this child, now that this child is now growing, is going to remain suppressed, and how retention is going to be good? Number two, the last question is if an expert can come in and just remind us a bit, because I've noticed that there was extended EAC and there was a changing of ABC to 3TC from OG to BT. A little bit of some knowledge on that, if you can be reminded, would be appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. So maybe I'll help Sister Veronica with the comments on the peer pairing modality. Unless you have a response. I know this was about 2 years ago. Maybe now you have something, but this is a case of an opportunity that we missed about 2 years ago. Sister Veronica, could you kindly update us on what is happening on any peer pairing modalities? Do you have mentor-mother model in Ndola, or do you pair the mothers who are like this one, who have high viral load and need to be followed up in MCH? Then there was an issue of the DOT plan, which I think you highlighted. This child is already attached to a caseworker who is following up to ensure that the child is receiving the medication. On the ABC3TC, the issue was with the vomiting. So they divided the dosages, one to be given in the morning, the other one in the evening. And that way there was, they noted there was reduced vomiting, which the mother had reported. Sister Veronica, your comments on peer pairing.
Thank you. At the time the child was born, we had mentor mothers, and the mother together with the child were paired to a mentor mother. Despite being paired, all the counseling was done together with the MCH personnel, because the MCH, its locality, and the main ART, they are localized in two different, two geographical departments, two different places. So despite being paired with a mentor mother, the DBS was not done at birth. There was a concern as to why was it not done. Even at 6 days, it's the same reason. We didn't have reagents to collect, but the pairing was done. Currently, we don't have mentor mothers. We have ECAP. They are the ones that are helping us in the management of pediatric clients based in community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Veronica. We'll just ask one person to give their comment or question, then we need to respond to these two questions. Severino, go ahead, then we need to start responding to question 1 and question 2.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really want to appreciate for this very nice presentation. We are actually learning a lot from this case. This is Severino from Discover Health Project. We are told that this child was positive on NAT amplification test, and then the woman at the point of testing, in fact, when she was delivering, she had a very high viral load of over 8,000, if I'm not mistaken. I just wanted to find out if this woman was on ART at this point, or she was naive, or if she was on ART, was it as a result of non-adherence to treatment, looking at the social cultural characteristics of this woman? Because if she was on ART and she was not compliant, I think these are the problems we keep on having as a country. May I know if she was on ART or not? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Veronica. Was mother to FM on ART at the time of delivery?
Yes, she was on medication and she was unsuppressed for a longer period of time. I highlighted verbally to say that the mother was also on EAC throughout the pregnancy. Thank you
so much. Your question, Mr. Severino, really brings out a lot of issues. How do we ensure that ART is optimized for pregnant and breastfeeding women to ensure that they are very suppressed and they don't transmit to their babies? How are we managing women in MCH with high viral load? So this woman was on EAC, but what was done to ensure that she was very suppressed, especially at the time of delivery, to reduce mother-to-child transmission, and nothing was done. This was an SVD delivery. There was a question in the chat. This was an SVD delivery. So we have two questions. Someone had attempted to respond to the first question. We need to ensure that we train the people and reorient people on the guidelines and the protocols, the SOPs on how to test infants. But this case has brought out issue of stockouts of DBF cards and other things that are required, which I think was beyond what the facility could do. But what is it we can do when we are faced with such a circumstance to ensure that we don't miss out on testing infants born to HIV positive women? As an ECO, what do you think we need to do? The second question is, what other necessary intervention could have been employed in this case to reduce mother-child transmission since the mother had a high viral load around the time of delivery? So your quick responses to the concerns from Ruto. I think as we are discussing, we are responding to some of them. And one issue I think I picked out from the PMTCT nurse mentor from Chilenje is that we need to ensure that mothers who are HIV positive are linked or are paired to their peers in MCH, such that they are able to follow them up and remind them on when they need to bring their babies for testing in case we do not provide the test. This is indeed a missed opportunity for us. What else can we do to ensure that a mother with a high viral load does not transmit HIV to her baby? Anyone to give a comment? If at all there's no one from the network, I would ask our experts, Dr. Gloria Muntali, Dr. Muya, and Dr. Chimika Piri, to give their comments on this case.
I can start, Chair.
Yes, Dr. Chimika.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I thank you, Luto, for a very educating case. And I agree with the chair that it's really practical. And these are the real issues that we hardworking facility workers face. And you really need to put your situation into context for you to have a solution. So just to respond to question 1 and 2, I think most of the interventions have been discussed by the network, but just to echo that the first one, which talks about we do not miss out on testing infants born to. So one intervention that we are encouraging the facilities to ensure is to do the cohort monitoring. What this entails is that each time you record an exposed infant, you need to have a plan for that infant in terms of the timings for the testing, and also the way we do with other recipient of care. That same approach should be used here, where we track this baby on the scheduled testing times, so that we don't miss out. So birth, 6 weeks, and then the other timings that have been according to national guidelines. So we expect that facilities should be able to implement the cohort monitoring. Currently, the Smart Care Legacy has the cohort electronic tool that should be able to help you and run the report. But we also encourage facilities to sort of use the registers, or if not, you can use the mother baby pair register, where you know which babies you expect to come for this month for retesting. And if they've transferred out, encourage them to get an official, or let them notify you so that you can communicate to the receiving facility. In addition to what other colleagues have mentioned in terms of pairing, the peer pairing, I think this is also very important. That's shown good retention to exposed infants, and also help to determine the final outcome. So it may be a mother to mother, like the mentor mother model, or mentor mother like, or indeed you can use the CBV to pair. I think facilities have different modalities which are still working, but it borders on the peer approach. On the second question, I think this was a bit unique in that the mother already, we noticed that she had problems in terms of adherence antenatally, and by the time that she was delivering, she had high viral load, meaning that already this had increased chances of passing on the virus to the baby. So just to emphasize on this is that we encourage, like in Zambia, we encourage exclusive breastfeeding as one of the interventions the first 6 months, because this actually is shown to that. Remember, when you do mixed feeding, you compromise the gut, and this breaks the protective layer and then exposes the gut to a virus, and the baby can easily get the infection through the breast milk. So we encourage the mothers to exclusively breastfeed. And I know others that can opt to exclusive replacement. You can do that, but we know that majority of the people may not be able to afford replacement feed, so we encourage exclusive breastfeeding. In addition, ensure that we start the baby on ARVs prophylaxis on time. The moment we discover that this baby is exposed, we start that baby on ARVs prophylaxis. It's not just dispensing, but let the caregiver understand how to prepare, and also appropriate dosing. Adherence is key for these ARVs to work in terms of providing the prophylactic nature. And then in addition, we need to endeavor to see how we can make the mother achieve viral suppression, like what you did. I think there could be various interventions. Now we have better drugs, but those drugs can only work if the adherence is good. So like the dot plan, I'm sure that this could also have worked to the mother, or pairing the mother to a CBV or somebody, a peer mother, just to ensure that the mother takes the medication every day. So these are some of the additional comments I wanted to make in terms of how we can other interventions that we can put in place to ensure that we reduce the MTCT of HIV from to the baby. Over.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chimika Piri. You have spoken with a lot of passion. I know how you are passionate about mother-to-child transmission of HIV, and you have really summarized the issues and how we can apply different strategies to ensure that the baby doesn't end up with infection. Dr. Muntali, under 1 minute.
So thank you very much. And thank you, Luvuto, for that very interesting case. And thank you, Meg, for the presentation. I'll just look at the stock out of the DBS cards. This shows how we have administrative and also supply chain challenges. And this starts from the facility up to the district. The facility should not wait until they are completely stocked out. I don't know what the reason was for the stock out at Luvuto, but we shouldn't wait until we are completely stocked out. We have the district lab, we have the provincial lab or pharmacy whom we can get in touch with. And we know that sometimes other facilities are even overstocked. So movement of stocks around the district or province will help us overcome this challenge of stockouts. So I think briefly in a 1 minute, that's what I have to say. Thanks, Dr. Manzi.
Thank you so much for that excellent feedback, Dr. Muntali. There was even a comment from Dr. Mubiana. Indeed, it's important to have a network and also to ensure kids are moved around to avoid missing opportunities, especially for testing children. Dr. Muya, your last comment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Manzi. Thank you, Dr. Meg, for the good presentation. From the first poll question, it was saying the gap where, which ones, the age range, you could see majority of the network said less than 5, which means we know where the problem is as a people. So we need to make sure that we test or cover that age range, because we know from the poll question, the way people answered. That was really very good, Dr. Meg, to bring it out and for the people to respond. So on Luvuto, again, thank you for the good case, very practical indeed. The first question, which was how do we ensure that we don't miss out testing in children? I think Dr. Piri did summarize it very well, but all I can say also is that can we all be interested as health workers? Because what we have seen on the ground is that the testing of children at birth in most of the facilities is left out to CBVs. The nurses, sorry to say this, I must say, I must apologize from the way it go, but I've no other way of putting it. There seem to be no interest because they say we are not trained or this and that story, and children end up being missed. This is very, very practical and very true. So I would urge the network, and particularly our colleagues working in the labor ward, MCH, can we please be interested in ensuring that the babies are tested? Because if that person is not there and is over the weekend, the baby is missed. And this is what really happens on the ground. So I would urge all of us that please, can we be interested? If you're going to ensure that mother-to-child transmission is reduced, let's test. This child, you can see clearly, there was no test that was done, but prophylaxis was given. And most likely this baby actually was infected at birth. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Mazin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Muya. Those were our experts giving their input on the presentation and on the case. So we have come to the end of our presentation. I think in summary, this afternoon we've tried to respond to the question, where are we missing the children? There's no one response to this question. We are missing children to women who tested negative at first and later on they are missed out. No retesting is done. Let's retest the mothers throughout breastfeeding. We are also missing children who are hard to reach to. These are non-biological children who could be orphans, and also children who are brought to the facility by non-biological caregivers, making it very difficult for us to test the children. Issues around supply chain, let's ensure that we strengthen those. Dr. Muya has highlighted one issue where we all need to take interest, especially as midwives, doctors, and nurses working in labor ward. You deliver a baby to a mother who's HIV positive, what do you need to do? Are you just going to give prophylaxis and let her go? Ensure that a test is also provided. And Luvuto really brought out that case. Thank you so much to our didactic presenter, Dr. Meg, all the way presenting from Atlanta in the US. Thank you so much, Sister Veronica Piri from Luvuto for the wonderful guest. And thank you, all dear network, for staying on. And thank you, our dear experts. For me and in the Echo Hub at UTH, it's bye. We'll see you next week for another interesting presentation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Manzi. Bye.
Thank you, Doc.